The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, what used to be known as food stamps, will run out of money on Saturday. The Trump administration says the debit-like cards nearly 42 million Americans rely on will not be refilled as the federal government shutdown drags on. To discuss that and other developments in politics in our regular Wednesday political roundup, we are joined today by University of Houston political science professor Jeronimo Cortina, who's also the co-host of Houston Public Media's Party Politics program, and Mark Jones, political science fellow at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Good morning to you both.
Morning, Craig.
Good morning.
I feel like a broken record bringing up the federal government shutdown, but I would think there's a pretty big difference here between increased delays at airports, which are unfortunate and frustrating in the moment, or squabbling over when and how non-essential federal workers may be reimbursed, and that's frustrating for them. In some cases, those going unpaid, it's very frustrating and difficult. But there's that, and then there's access to food for 42 million Americans. Is this the line? Is this the point at which we start to see some resolution in this impasse?
Well, I think both sides are hoping that. That's one of the reasons why, in some ways, they're sort of pushing each other to the edge. Donald Trump certainly hopes that this will spur Democrats to agree to the continuing resolution and then sit down and negotiate over health care, whereas Democrats are hoping that the Trump administration sees this as sort of such a consequential impact that it decides to approve the medical subsidies for Affordable Care Act health plans. But right now, they're sort of stuck in the sand. But you're right, this is where we're starting to see actually the consequences sort of externalized and spread to a much larger share of the population. Up until now, it's been primarily federal workers and then to people who are sort of indirectly affected by, say, air travel issues. But now you're having 42 million people who are used to having their EBT card replenished on November 1st, and that's not going to happen.
Geronimo?
Yeah, I think it's the absurdity of some of the polarization and the impacts that this extreme polarization has. And when you're thinking about 42 million people that might go hungry, is absurd in the sense that we are the most powerful economy in the world, the most powerful country in the world, and we're having these problems in terms of thinking about if we're going to open the government or not. And in addition, you have federal workers that need to pay bills, need to put food on the table, need to take sometimes another job to pay the bills. So it is just simply absurd that issues regarding or the issue that, for example, the Democrats are battling in terms of getting a response are also extremely consequential in terms of leaving perhaps 4 million people without access to healthcare. And these are going to be people that are going to contribute to the economy, are going to pay taxes, are going to buy stuff, et cetera, keeping the economy alive. So it's an irony, but it's also absurd at the same time.
We had Brian Green from the Houston Food Bank on the show last week, and we were talking about this. He pointed out that it's kind of like a rolling effect because, you know, November 1st, not like all 42 million suddenly don't get money. It's a certain percentage of them, and then the next day and the next day and the next day until, within a month or so, then suddenly everybody's out of this funding or whatever, will not have this SNAP debit card like thing refilled. In anticipation of this surge in need, the food bank is opening special distribution sites for both federal workers and these SNAP recipients. The nonprofit also plans to spend into a deficit to meet that surge. What other impacts might we start to see more directly here in Houston?
Well, I think as Haran was mentioning, you have a lot of federal workers who are not being paid but being required to work. You're going to start to see some of them not showing up for work, either resigning, quitting, or simply calling in sick. So air traffic delays, which are already we're starting to experience, you may see more of those. And then all of the workers that are working on things like from the IRS to Small Business Administration to the EPA, none of that really is being done, or the Department of Agriculture in terms of supervising, monitoring, essentially factories and production sites to make sure that quality control is being carried out. none of that's occurring. So we're going to start to see sort of a snowball effect where things that they've been able to paper over for the past few weeks are start to be more consequential.
I don't want to sound overly cynical, but when it comes to past squabbles in Congress and impasses, especially over the budget, but really over any variety of things, it always seems like things get resolved and rather quickly as soon as it is personally impacting members of Congress. To that end, if this isn't the deadline, would it be Thanksgiving when they all have families to get to for the holidays? And maybe at that point they'll say, "Oh no, I guess we do need to resolve this now."
Well, maybe, right? But here is the consequences are huge because it impacts regardless if you are a Democrat or a Republican representing a particular district. I mean, what Mark just said, just think about if you don't have quality inspections in mid-market production. That can have very important public health consequences eventually. And now the effects are going to be trickled down even more to the average American that might be completely oblivious of what is a government shutdown or doesn't feel it right now. Because as Mark said, probably they're not traveling. But now these things are becoming more granular and the impact is going to be eventually up to a point where Democrats and Republicans have to make a decision. But now, for both sides, they're playing this chicken and egg or the game of chicken, right? In such a way that Democrats want to hold the line a little bit more. So, for example, people can get those notices that many people have been gotten in terms of your Affordable Care Act insurance is going to get more expensive. Some companies have already, for example, not offering services in the health insurance market because it's not going to be cost effective for them. So that's when people are going to notice these things. And we have also the internal movement or the internal divisions within the Republican Party. For example, Representative Margaret Taylor Greene just saying, we have to pay attention to these things because it's going to affect and impact our constituents. And we're months away from a primary and a year away from the midterm election.
All right, you bring up elections. I guess we ought to talk about redistricting because good grief, it just keeps cascading here. This is now a nationwide redistricting saga. What's the latest, Mark?
Well, so we started off in Texas. Texas dropped in maps for 5 new Republican seats in an ideal world for Republicans. California countered. Then we saw Missouri come in with 1 more for Republicans after California came in with 5 more for Democrats. We've seen North Carolina add 1 seat that potentially could go better for Republicans. And we also have recently seen Indiana working to call their legislature back into special session to increase the number of Republican seats there by 1. In response, we're seeing states like Virginia where Democrats hold sway, trying to rush through a reform during this House of Delegates session, which ends relatively soon, so that in the next House of Delegates session, they can pass new maps and effectively create some more Democratic seats.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but Virginia, are they the ones who they need a constitutional amendment?
Yeah.
And basically what it would say is we can only change our maps if other states start changing their maps. Is that the idea?
Right, and it has to be done in 2 separate legislatures, which they have the advantage that because they're holding elections on next Tuesday, their House of Delegates will effectively be in office. They'll have 2 separate legislatures, so they'll be able to do it.
All right. Back here in the Houston area, early voting continues, and Election Day is Tuesday. What's turnout been like so far? What are we seeing?
Well, very low. Yeah. So it has been, and this is normal, especially when we're thinking about constitutional elections. We have here in Harris County in the city of Houston other elections that might increase a little bit of turnout, but in other parts of the state, or for example in Fort Bend County, it's only the 17 constitutional amendments, and turnout is extremely low.
Yeah, and I think we're probably looking at a situation where we may statewide not even cross 10% of registered voters. We'll be probably pretty close there. But as Geronimo mentioned, there aren't many things driving people to vote in a lot of parts of the states outside of pockets like Austin, where there's a property tax increase for homeowners on the ballot, and San Antonio, where the Spurs are trying to get a new stadium. And so that's driving turnout. But even there, we're talking it's at 6 or 7% right now, as opposed to the average of 3 or 4%.
Well, how about here in Houston in the 18th congressional district, where they're trying to decide on somebody to fill out the remainder of late Sylvester Turner's term? Are we seeing turnout a little higher there?
Well, you have to look at the voter files for that, and I haven't been. That's something that you have to pay for, and so it's more complicated. So it's tough to disaggregate what we're seeing in Houston based on just the publicly released data. You'd have to go to the actual voter files. I'm sure the campaigns are. That's likely to drive turnout a little higher, but still, it's not an election that's going to lead to a normal level like we said if we had, say, if there was a mayoral election. But I would expect within the confines of Congressional District 18, we're going to be in the double digits, but probably more in the teens in terms of voter turnout rather than in the high single digits.
And I guess we should stress again that most likely it also will not resolve. That election is almost certainly headed for a runoff just because there's so many candidates in the race, right?
Right. There's 16 candidates in the race, and the votes pretty divided between Christian Menifee, Amanda Edwards, Jolanda Jones, and a platoon of other candidates. But combined, they're likely to force it to a runoff. And because of federal laws that run and some strategic calculations by the governor, the earliest that could occur is late January. More likely it'll be held in February.
Okay, so if it's not held, the runoff, assume it goes to a runoff. Yeah. It's not held till February. When exactly would the newly elected representative take office?
Well, that will depend if Speaker Mike Johnson wants to let them, as we were having a representative elected from Arizona who's having some difficulty getting sworn in. But I think the most likely scenario would be that person would be sworn in, the winner, sometime in late February, meaning that Congressional District 18 will have been without representation for almost a full year.
Geronimo, what impact has it had on folks in that district going so long without a voting representative?
Well, it's, I think, violation of constitutional rights of not being represented in Congress, right? And it's as simple as that. And the fact of the matter is that it doesn't matter if it was a Republican or a Democrat representing a particular district. It's the fact that representation on our republic, our democratic system, is based on this representative underlined democracy. So when you don't have that part of the representation in this process, then we're weakening or chipping away our foundational values in terms of having a representative underlying democracy.
Jeronimo Cortina is the co-host of Houston Public Media's Party Politics program. You can catch it Friday nights at 7:30 on News 88.7, Friday nights at 8 on Houston Public Media TV8. It's also available on YouTube as well and wherever you get your podcasts. Jeronimo is also a political science professor at the University of Houston. Mark Jones is a political science fellow at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. Jeronimo, Mark, thank you both very much.
Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.